Yep. I feel like that. Are you Jeannie? Yes. Rock and roll. All right. There you go. How are you? It's all good. Do you have a PowerPoint? Perfect. I can get you all loaded up. If you want to go, do your thing. Video. Oh, they close 65? Oh, no kidding.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. How are y'all?
Do you have Zoom on your laptop?
What?
A Zoom, like the Zoom app? Okay. You wouldn't mind signing into that. Consolidate. I can just create this system real quick. Sorry. This. You want it quicker or are you good with all right. Good. And then do your PowerPoint. Yeah.
Are you ready for that?
Let me do this. Let me share. Get all this stuff. All right. It should be set. And then Mike, good height for you.
Good enough. Yep. Thank you. Hello, everyone. I'm Jeannie Hunter. I'm the regional director of the Society of St. Andrew. The Society of St. Andrew is a gleaning organization. And so today I wanted to tell you a little bit about gleaning back 5,000 years ago and still today. I'm going to start with one of the oldest stories that we have in scripture, and that is the story of Ruth. Once upon a time, there was a family, a mother and father and two sons, and they lived in a land where there wasn't any food. So they moved on to somewhere else. And while they were there, the sons grew up and they got married. And then there was a famine in that place. And so the dad and the two sons died. And we end up with the mom and two daughters-in-law. And the mom was like, you guys, just go back home. It's okay. Go back with your families. It's, it'll be better for everybody that way. And the one daughter-in-law was like, definitely bye. And the other one said, no way, I'm staying with you no matter what. And so one of them stayed, one of them went. And Naomi and Ruth went back to Bethlehem then. So this is them re-entering Bethlehem. And Naomi said, Ruth, here's what we need to do. This is the land of the people of Yahweh. And those people leave food behind when they are harvesting their fields. You need to go out in the field and you need to go harvest some of this food. So Ruth went out and gleaned. She would go behind the workers that were harvesting, and whenever they would drop, she could pick up. And she was with other probably women, maybe children. And then one day she met the landowner whose name was Boaz, and he took a fancy and was like, oh, glean all you want. Here, let me also just give you this extra pile of barley. And then there's, kind of a Cinderella story after that. We'll say Cinderella story. And then eventually Ruth ends up having a son, and that son is in the lineage of Jesus, King David, and then of course Jesus. So this all happened because in the law of the land of that time, it was written that you leave food behind for people. And it was written that way. Do I need to read it? Is it too small or anything? Can you all read it? Okay. It was written in the law of the land, and it was written in there as a reminder of humility. Verse 22, as you see, it says, remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt, therefore I am commanding you to do this. It's saying you're no better than the people who are poor. You're no better than the alien, the orphan, and the widow. And so you need to provide for them. Leviticus similarly has a similar scripture, leave them for the poor and the alien, for I am the Lord your God. I should say those laws were added into scripture just about at the time that agriculture was actually becoming a thing. And so it's one of the first kind of food justice laws, one of the first food stamps even. So these are the folks in Davidson County or the state of Tennessee who are food insecure. And food insecure means that they don't know where their next meal is coming from at some point. And usually in this survey, they'll say in the last 2 weeks. So at some point in the last 2 weeks, this many people did not know where their food was coming from. And that was in 2022. So we all know the prices of food and the way of things since then. Of course, food insecurity comes with it a lot of stress and anxiety, and also brings all kinds of heart and liver and diabetic issues. Besides all that stress and anxiety, for children, it means they can't pay attention in school, and then that makes a long-term impact on them. So today, Gleaning looks a lot like this, which is kind of a lot like what it looked like back in Ruth's day. This is a youth group that came out to a farm in West Nashville, and they gleaned kale. The farmer said that the bugs were about to start getting at the kale, and if you wash it, of course, and cook it, it's still very good to eat, just maybe not salad material because it's not so pretty. And so they harvested a ton a ton of kale and eventually donated it. So the Society of St. Andrew, where I work, coordinates volunteers from all these different places to go out and glean fields. And then we take the food to different soup kitchens, homeless shelters, food pantries, that kind of thing. And sometimes they cook it up into lovely meals and they send us pictures, which I love. Nowadays, though, gleaning also looks different. We do still do the farm fields, but we also do packing houses. We will be, there are these giant warehouse contraptions, like as big as this room probably, that you dump piles and piles of sweet potatoes into, and their machines sort out the ones that are good and the ones that are not good. And good meaning a perfect, like, kind of football shape, of the right size, not too big, not too small. And then there's people that sort out whether it has a spot on it and whether that spot is just unacceptable. And so the good stuff and the bad stuff, the ugly stuff, get separated. The good stuff can go to the grocery store, can be sold, and the bad stuff, which is not bad, it's just different, goes to us a lot of times. And we'll take those truckloads of sweet potatoes, sometimes to a church, sometimes to a business, and folks will bag them up and get them into a size that's manageable for somebody at a food pantry, a 10-pound bag, or something that's manageable for the food pantries to hand out. This is one of our more unusual gleaning situations. Y'all know edible arrangements. Well, they'll slice a pineapple, and they'll end up like this, and they punch one or two shapes out of it with a cookie cutter, and all the rest of that pineapple is just kind of left there. So we've partnered with 2 different edible arrangement stores in Knoxville, and they just give us all their excess fruit. And we take it to a local shelter there where they make fruit salad out of it. We do markets. We have a relationship with Trader Joe's in Franklin. And we even work in schools. In schools, there's lots and lots of food waste. And so, well, not in middle schools, they eat everything. But in elementary schools, they might not want their milk, or they may not want whatever it is that they're eating. And so they, at some schools, they'll put up a share table, and that lets other kids who might want to have that apple that Susie didn't want, or might want to have that milk that Bobby didn't want, I don't know. And they can pick up each other's food, but whatever's still left behind after that, the schools will have a refrigerator, and they'll stash it all in there, and our volunteers will go and pick it up once a week, and then usually take it to rescue missions, sometimes Catholic charities. In the last, that's a long time, 7 years, this is how much that we have distributed. This was I ran these numbers in September, I think. So we are up to 1.3 million pounds now for 2024. And just getting better and better all the time. 2022, we won't talk about. It was a rough year. Nationally, Society of St. Andrew has rescued and shared 1 billion pounds. They just reached that 1 billion pound mark in September, which was really exciting, a big celebration. They were founded in 1979. There were a couple of Methodist ministers who decided, you know what, we're going to solve hunger by starting a farm. And pastors are not farm people, are not farmers, usually. And so they quickly found out about that, and they quickly found out about the way that different food could be rejected because of the shape and size and whatever. And they decided to do something. Instead of letting that food go to waste, let's rescue it and share it with people. And so that first shipment, I think, was 81 or 83. And so we just hit that 1 billion pound mark. We like to say that all of us in SoSA, this work helps hungry people. They're getting fresh stuff instead of like day old pastries or canned stuff. It helps the hunger relief agencies. It reduces the impact on their budget to be able to serve that fresh produce. It helps farmers for a couple different reasons. They can donate. Because they're donating the food, excuse me, they can get a tax deduction. But also in the field, when a blueberry farmer told me about this, so I'll tell you about the blueberries. He wants us out there and he's like, you get every single blueberry, because if they land on the ground, they're a nice, wet, sugary place for pests. And the pests will burrow in there and then they'll lay their eggs or whatever, and then they'll be there again next year when it's time. So if we harvest every single berry, there won't be that ideal, perfect little place for the pests to settle in. And it helps not only this year, but next year. So that goes the same with a lot of different produce when it lands on the ground. Being able to pick that up before it rots is, they call it field hygiene, which I feel like is a weird phrase, but I'm not a farmer, so. And finally, like at the imaginary sweet potato sorting place that I was telling you about, all those ugly ones, they can sell some of them for canning. They can share some of them with the farmer down the road for their hogs or whatever. But some of them, they're just going to end up having to dump into a landfill. And the tipping fees for that can be really expensive. So that's the ways that we help farmers. Volunteers, of course, get to get their hands dirty. They get to be outside in the sunshine, and that is really good. For younger volunteers, it's good for especially children to see where their food comes from. For kids that have only ever, seen their food at the grocery store, or even delivery now, it seems like we get so much by delivery. Food does not just magically appear on our doorsteps. It comes out of the ground, which is another kind of magic. But yeah. And we also help the planet. Food waste is a big issue environmentally. We all waste a lot more than we realize, and it costs us money. But also all of that food going into landfills causes greenhouse gases, methane, that contribute to climate change. And so when we're keeping food out of landfills, we're helping protect the planet and reduce the impact of methane. So I told you a little bit already about why food might go unused between farm and grocery store. This is Esther, but my daughter, but a very long time ago. That's now she's like up here. But I still love this picture because this is an ugly potato, even though it's shaped like a sweet little heart. Bananas have to be like just the right curvature even. They have to look just right. Peaches have to be within a 1/4 inch. If the peaches are too big, they get rejected, which I never heard of a peach that's too big. Every peach is good, as far as I can tell. Sometimes it's a time of year thing. This year might be one of those examples. I had a farmer say, it's been warm all the way up through Thanksgiving. It's been warm all the way up through Christmas. Nobody wants sweet potatoes. Like that's a cold weather food. That's something you think about with fall. And then after the holidays, it's over, and you don't really think about sweet potatoes much after the holidays either. And so he was like, I have all this excess of sweet potatoes. And it's crazy how many factors go into whether someone's hard work is going to be purchased by the grocery store or not. When we waste all that food, whether it's because it's ugly or because of something else, we're wasting all the resources that go into growing it. I don't know if I have the internet to be able to watch a video, but probably not the sound. That's okay. So you think about all the labor that went into it, all the money to pay the labor that went into it, all the land, the water, the chemicals, which is a whole nother conversation about pollution. And then all of the resources and efforts that go into transporting it. And that's a lot of environmental impact. It's a lot of financial impact and waste. And it's just a lot of effort for farmers to have to go through to end up with this stuff in the trash. Um, we talked about that a little bit. The EPA used to say that the best way to address food waste is by just not having as much, by like managing what you have to begin with. And then with feeding hungry people is the second priority, with what to do with excess food. After that, animals. And then industrial uses, you can use methane gas if you capture it as like a fuel. So that's one thing. And then composting is an option that can be good fertilizer for the land. And of course, the very last option that they would want you to do is to put it in the landfill or incinerate it. The new guidance just came out, I think last year. It's supposed to be what has the most impact and what has the least environmental impact. That one that says leave unharvested, I take a little bit of issue with, because of what I told you about the pests that can be added to the soil. That's okay. In 2016, they estimated that there are about 10 million tons left behind in farm fields. They basically asked farmers how much they thought would be left behind on farms. And so those are all very estimated. In 22, they had some more estimates, a little bit more experimentation. And then a professor in North Carolina came up with a way to measure how much really is left behind. And it works out perfectly for Society of St. Andrew to help figure that out because we're already in the fields after harvest. And so I worked with the EPA to get a grant here, and we measured a few different farms to see what's left behind. And you learn pretty quickly that what is left behind is almost 75% edible. And so if there could be more gleaning or more ways to get that food, there's lots of resources then that farmers could maybe do something with it. They still have to figure out, is it worth the labor costs? And if it's all edible but not marketable, if it's not pretty but still edible, is it worth it for them to harvest it to sell at a reduced rate for canning? Or is it something that they might have to like make salsa out of their tomatoes or something like that? And then that's a whole nother added layer. But these two articles have been published in Biocycle about those experiments. So it's cyclical too, kind of a spiral. Food waste, as it contributes to climate change, also contributes to the way that we produce food. As the earth is getting warmer, plants that have been bred for decades, millennia to respond to a certain temperature cycle are suddenly like, I don't know what's happening, and don't know how to grow the way that they used to. And also the big weather events impact farms, from flooding to drought, and it creates a whole lot of concerns for folks. Mac is one of our farmers that grows sweet potatoes, and he has diversified what he grows out there, but he at one point had to sell 2/3 of his land because of just a couple of years in a row where there was severe drought or there was an early freeze, and just all of that made it impossible for him to keep going. And then Matt is another farmer that had a similar situation. We went out one year after there was a drought over the summer, and all of the sweet potatoes were either like this big or like this big. Because if they had gotten started in the spring rains, then they were already started and they were doing okay. But if they didn't get going until the fall rain, then they were just tiny little things. And so there was no in between. And so none of that field was usable for him. None of that was marketable for him. But it's still good food. It's still edible. It's still nutritious. Still delicious. So there are lots of different ways that people are adjusting their agricultural practices now to deal with weather changes. There's also some different public policy options that people could and should probably consider. There's nobody in the Department of Agriculture working on climate change, nobody teaching farmers how to adapt to it because it doesn't exist. We already have Good Samaritan laws to protect people who donate food. You can donate food and not worry about getting sued. That's a question farmers have for us. If somebody gets sick, are they going to sue me? And the answer is no. There is a law that protects food donations to the extent that, like, unless you're like deliberately poisoning it, basically, you're protected. So increased tax donations for farmers would also be helpful. So we have volunteer opportunities and we have donation opportunities. And usually I like to end with another story, and that is that Jesus was telling stories to his people. And do we need to move? Oh, okay. One day, and everybody was enthralled, and he tried to get away and like be like, all right, we're done for the day, but they followed him. And so it was getting to be about dinner time, and he and the disciples were like, we need to feed these people. How are we going to do this? And one of the disciples, who happened to be Andrew, brought over this kid that had some loaves and fishes. And Jesus shared the loaves and fishes. And not only did they feed the whole crowd, but there were 12 baskets left over afterwards. And I share that story because it emphasizes the abundance. There's plenty. There's plenty of food in this world. We can feed everybody, no problem. It's about how we do it and about our attitude in how we do it. If we're like the kid and say, look, we have this that we can share and we're willing to share it, everyone can be fed. We did not call the organization Society of the Kid with the Loaves and Fishes. That would have been a little bit of a mouthful, but Andrew brought that kid forward. So maybe the folks bringing the farmers out is the way we're talking about it. But yeah, that's the Society of St. Andrew. That's Gleaning 5,000 years ago, Gleaning today. What questions do y'all have? Yes. It's complicated. One of them told me that the sun is getting hotter, but there's not climate change. So and a lot of the crops in Tennessee are commodity crops like tobacco, soy, corn, not for eating, corn for ethanol or for cattle feed or something like that. And so we obviously don't work with those farmers very much. Or meat growers, yeah. We do. And like, not a formal relationship, but if we have a truckload that someone is calling and saying, I have a truckload of peppers or whatever it might be, and we know a food bank that's nearby, we'll call them and say, hey, can you guys receive a truckload of peppers today? No. So they were founded in Virginia, and we have offices in 10 states, mostly in the Southeast, but also Ohio and Indiana. And they're looking at expanding further west, but mostly in the Southeast right now. Yes. Sure. Yeah. Yeah. Yesterday, we had a conversation about food and land and churches, um, and about all the ways that churches that have so much land and they're called to feed their neighbor, where do those places intersect? So we had a panel of someone from Feeding America, someone who has a big church garden, almost farm, someone who deals with land grants and land trusts, and who am I forgetting? Oh, the director of the urban farm over at Trevecca, and just had a really great conversation about what it means to feed our neighbor, and in the context especially of churches having so much land and wealth in this country. Was there anything that you particularly wanted to mention? Mhm. They're in North Nashville, in front of their church property. So it's this, yeah, it's a good outreach to the community as far as it serves them, but it also draws people to that congregation. Um, we had a potato drop there one time, and a mailman came through, the mail truck came through and got a whole bunch of them and was like, I'm just going to drop them off at the houses I know that need it. And so they have really built a really, really touching relationship with that neighborhood because of that garden. Yeah. Okay. Hmm. Yeah, there are a lot of community gardens, and a lot of times they get built and then people get burnt out. Um, so it's something that you need a lot of solid volunteer effort, to keep going and to maintain. Um, but yeah, there are lots of churches with gardens. There are lots of neighborhoods and parks with gardens. Um, the Nashville Food Project has a farm that with led by immigrants, and they grow culturally specific foods, that they know how to use and know how to cook, and that feel like home for them. And there are lots of really special stories that are like that in this town, but we don't get together and talk about them a whole lot. So it was a good day yesterday. We don't have a warehouse. We just have an office. It's in a Sunday school room at Gordon Memorial United Methodist Church, which is also in North Nashville. And so a lot of our work is logistical, because we don't have a warehouse. We don't own trucks. We're just trying to get things to places that do. And so part of our work is having relationships with all these receiving agencies. We know who can take a big truck. We know who can, only take like a little bit and only once a month, because that's when they have their food pantry at their church, or who has refrigeration, who can only take potatoes because they can store and dry. So keeping track of that is a big part of it. Oh, we always need volunteers. We always need money. Um, we always need farmers, more farmers. If you know a farmer that isn't involved with us, we always can use that. Yeah. That, um, well, our thing is feeding hungry people. And so one of our things is also we don't charge for it. We only give food. So that's a big piece of what we do. I did the other day make a connection between one of our farmers and Kroger, but we won't tell too many people about that. Grocery stores, the biggest grocery stores all have connections with Feeding America. They have contracts with Feeding America that mean that they exclusively give to the big food banks. So Second Harvest around here. But smaller grocery stores don't have those. So we have that relationship with Trader Joe's. If there's an independent grocery store, like a mom and pop place, we can work with them sometimes. And sometimes when one of the stores has more than the Feeding America Food Bank can handle receiving, they will sometimes give us a call and be like, can you do once a week here or something like that? So we don't do a lot of restaurants because it's prepared food, and that's a whole nother level of temperature control and food safety and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Not as often, but sometimes, yeah. I'll never forget the day somebody called and was like, "We have a whole hog," and um, I was like, I don't even know where to begin right now. But we called National Food Project. They knew a butcher and everything got figured out. Yeah, we have in Knoxville, we have an egg farmer, egg chicken farm. I don't know what we have a farmer that has tons and tons of eggs. And every year when his new flock starts laying eggs, they're smaller than regular because they're like little baby chickens, so they make little baby eggs. And he donates those smaller eggs to us and we can take those. And then the next year when they're full grown, he keeps them and sells them himself. But that's the thing. When the pandemic started, he sold to restaurants. And so restaurants all shut down. And he was like, I have tons of eggs. And so we got those out to lots of different places that could feed our neighbors. So it's a lot of really fun and interesting stories, a lot of good people that I've been able to run into. Yeah, there's I want to say Hunt for the Hungry or something like that, Hunters for the Hungry. That is still in existence. And yeah, where you would normally only get I don't know, get a permit to um hunt one deer in a season. You can sometimes get a second one if you donate that second one to Hunters for the Hungry or something like that. And there's a lot of details around how that works out. Sometimes, yeah. Yeah. Um, we're also hearing about regenerative agriculture, which is a whole nother, it's like the next step after organic. It's some fascinating stuff. There's potential to not just reduce carbon by not having food waste that goes into landfills, but also to growing roots into the ground and holding on to soil and all of that. They call it sinking carbon into the soil. So there's a whole lot of stuff about that that's going on right now too. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So compost allows the trash in it, the food in it, to get oxygen. In a landfill, they compress everything so much that there's no oxygen getting into it. And so it can't decompose the way it normally would in compost. So in like a backyard composter or whatever, bugs get into it, microbes get into it, and in a landfill, it's just not. Um, we're just an office, and so, and I think about doing a million different things, but we have the national that keeps me in line, so it's probably good. Mm-hmm. Sometimes, yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up. Use by dates are really information for the grocery store to know when to restock. They don't Food doesn't actually go bad on that use by date. It's not like there's a timer in there and all of a sudden you can't eat it anymore. So if you've got something that's close to the use by date, take a sniff, then you know if it's good or not. Just the way you would with anything else. So those use by dates, the only federally enforced use by dates are on baby formula. Everything else, it's just mhm. It's yeah, and people are really misled by those labels. Sometimes it'll say best by, and that's when it's literally best. It's not good until, it's just best by. Um, we have a relationship with the General Mills plant that's in Murfreesboro or Rutherford County, and they make yogurt, and they make basically all the yogurts just in different kinds of packages. And they're if they have like a flavor or something that's not selling well, or if it's like there's only a week or two left on this expiration date, we're not going to be able to get it to a grocery store and then out to people in time, we'll be able to share whole loads of yogurt then. Any other questions? I don't know what time it is. Yeah. A raised bed is a good start. Mhm. So going over to the garden after church, or going to the garden before church, or Wednesday night supper or something like that. Yep. Mhm. And the number of times we're told to feed our neighbors in scripture is just that's got to be the biggest takeaway from the Bible if you're reading it right. Any other questions? All right. Thank you. I'm glad to be here. Will Wellman, also has some farm background. So he's another good person to talk to about all this stuff. Yeah. Yeah. And one of the associates.